Hi, my name's Karyn Mehus, and my piece got selected for the Yellowstone Auction show this year, and it's called Translations in the Life of a Flower. I work in acrylic, and I usually work very large, but this is a medium-sized piece for me, and I'm learning to work small too. But my process with the development of a painting usually starts with me setting the room, lighting a candle, sitting down, and sometimes there's an outside influence. So I play music or a podcast, and for this piece, I was playing Star Wars, the movie. So I sat down with the canvas and I started to work with the paint. You can see here that there's a lot of water mixed in with the paint. That's what we get this really wavy look for. And the painting was at once sideways, and there was a lot of loose paint which was dripping down the canvas when it was facing this way. So that's where we get these lines. And then, because it's acrylic, it dries very fast. And so in a few minutes, I turned the painting up this way, and then I painted again. And as I was painting, I was reflecting on the galaxies, and it was Star Wars, so this is far off places. So in this piece, I was inspired by the way that the galaxy moves and the way that possibly the Earth was formed and the stars were formed, and there was a very expansive feeling, and the paint began to drip down this way. So then I had a structure where there was paint coming this way and paint going this way, most of which was out of my control. It was just allowing nature to take its course. And then, after the paint dried, I spent time with the piece as it was. It was a lot of blurred colors. It was mostly in these grays. I had some red in here that you can see has become pink a little bit. And throughout time, I sat with the canvas for a while, and then I grew a garden. And the garden was full of zinnias, and the zinnias captivated my mind because, again, we have this design in nature, this incredible structure of a flower coming out, and the flowers really spoke to me. So I began painting a series of zinnias and various flowers. And so as I approached this canvas again, I came back to this idea of what is nature presenting to us, and then how do we interact with it? So I came back in and I presented the flowers onto this canvas, creating a large space over here. You can see this plane of white-like color with a little bit of embellishment around the outside. I also had lines like a river coming through here, and those got painted over. And then I came in and it just was asking for some more color and some more of my input into this very natural galaxy kind of space. So I started to impose these small spaces of color. But I was adhering to what nature gave me. So these lines that fell this way and the lines that fell that way when the canvas was turned sideways stayed as they were. I wasn't wanting to interrupt them. I wanted to adhere to the forces that were already presented on the canvas. And I just came in and I added color. So these colors all represent parts of my zinnia garden. Different reds and pinks, yellows and greens. And then they kind of all blended together for the piece that it becomes now. And today we're going to do a little bit of this right here and how I came to this approach with the paint. And we'll get a chance to learn a little about how to create this structure and then add your own embellishments onto the structure that's already been given through nature. So here we are in the studio, and I wanted to share a few of the art supplies that I use and tips that I have for my studio. So I use, as you can see, many different kinds of paint. I've used Liquitex since I went to art school, so I like to use Liquitex, but I also buy Master's Touch at Hobby Lobby, and I use Golden when my brother sends me high-end paints. He likes to send me different things. I use Golden from him. And I also will, especially when I'm working on large canvases, I go to Home Depot and I buy their Oops paint. So this lovely color sample was 50 cents. So when I'm painting on very large canvases and doing lots of layers and some collaging, I use house paint. So that's fun and very inexpensive. I also, for mixing paint, I have a palette that I use, but I often use lids from yogurt or cream cheese, and that's helpful for lids. And then sometimes I make them into Christmas ornaments because they've got all this paint on them and they look really neat. And then I make Christmas ornaments and give them away as gifts. So that's a tip for you. I use mason jars for my water, and my favorite brush to use, again, when I'm on large pieces, is just a Purdy. This is probably a 2-inch, but a 1.5 is my favorite brush from Home Depot or Lowe's or your Ace Hardware, your local stores, and then various size brushes. Today we are going to work on, like the piece we have upstairs, my work upstairs in the museum is, we're going to work on an abstract dripping method, and we'll wait a few minutes for it to dry in between, but I'll just show you how that's done. So you're going to get a little bit of paint onto your palette, and you want to get quite a bit of water on here, and you want to have your water close. Some artists use a spray bottle or a squeeze bottle to add more water to their paint, but today we're just going to dip the brush. So here we go. And we have, on the floor, we have a drop cloth. I have recyclable shipping material for my drop cloth. And then I also have a larger drop cloth underneath. So first we're just gonna paint. Oh, I'm probably getting paint all over the walls. That's kind of fun. So we're just gonna get a nice, very wet paint, so you're gonna make a great big mess. My easel at home has a catch here, so I usually have some cloth to catch that. I like to go to yard sales and get washcloths and towels and cut them up, and I use those in my art studio. So here we're getting some nice dripping. I'm gonna get a little more paint. And here you can really pour it on. So this brush might be a little small for these purposes, but I'm just gonna keep going over and over. And you see that I'm starting to get these drips here. So this is how we're getting, there we go. We're getting some drips. And then you can start adding other kinds of, other colors, even other finishes of paint. So one thing that's fun about working with house paint is you have shiny paint and matte paint, gloss. See, now when you're mixing the colors, you're getting this variation here. So this beautiful little kind of like granite, the way that stone is created in the earth, granite is created in the earth by layers and layers of rock over time. So as you go back and forth between the two colors, you see this variation. So I'm going to go back to my darker color and paint over again. There we go. Now you're seeing those variations and those beautiful little color play and the layering. So that's kind of the idea of the galaxy being created. Just imagine. And you're kind of filling in the color there. You can also add other colors, and you can kind of come down a little so we have some variation, so it's not just one horizontal line, although that is very indicative of nature, as we see with our landscapes. And then you can kind of fill it up here, but later I'm going to develop this work up here. And we'll just let this, you can kind of squish the brush against the canvas. And you're squeezing out a little more paint and you're squeezing out a little more moisture. But you can see by doing this, you're creating some texture and some variation there. I'm going to add another of the darker color. Look, see, I love using blues. I grew up near the ocean, so I'm very attracted to anything that looks like the ocean. And of course, we all know the sky. So blue is peaceful color, and it also invokes the concepts of nature. All right, and then we're just gonna let that dry. So we're back, and we're gonna add our second layer here. I'm gonna do a little lighter paint. So here's some white. I'm staying with these 3 colors so I can really just get a base, but you can do whatever you like. You can add any colors you want to this process, and color is always fun. It's fun to see how they mix together. That's a whole lesson for another day. But for now, we're just gonna make a grid, so to speak, out of the drips going the other way. I will add some darker here. So we're doing our drips again, but we're gonna just come this way. So we're creating something like a grid, which is what we did in that piece upstairs. So again, you can just pick one small spot. Look at how much comes off of one small spot. And you just take your brush, and if you just add a little pressure, add some more water, or add some more paint, it's just gonna bring you this beautiful, random expression. It's like a flow, it's like a river when you watch the tributaries, or just watch a stream and how it flows. Now we're getting that grid. I am getting the easel nice and dirty, which is good. It's okay to get dirty. So wear clothes. I'm wearing my 1993 apron that I got when I bought a pan at the mall. Okay, so here's our grid. And then while you have extra on your brush, you can just fill in the rest of the canvas. So just taking the rest of this, so you're not wasting paint, just having fun. You can paint shapes if you'd like, whatever feels like it wants to happen. And then after this dries, we'll come back in and we'll create our own design in the spaces in between. But we'll let this dry. First, I'm going to use up a little more of this paint. You can hear the drips on the ground. Maybe grab some other color. And you can kind of, so with our brush, we're just adding different variations of pressure to get different variations of form. So I like using the side of the brush and sweeping like this, or you can certainly use the top of the brush to make lines, and then remove the lines, the gentle brush, and then again, the side of the brush creates a nice blending tool. And then as you're mixing these colors, you see these beautiful new colors emerge. And I always like to paint the sides of the canvas because the things that happen there are sometimes the things that you can't even see. And then oftentimes the sides of the canvas end up being my favorite. I think it's metaphorical of being appreciative of what happens for you in life, just what happens, what your circumstances are, and how you're going to deal with them, and what kind of gratitude you can find with them, and then what kind of art you can make out of them, no matter what they are. So there we go, and we'll let that dry. Now we have this grid that we've created by turning the canvas one way and letting the paint drip, and then turning it the other way and letting the paint drip this way. And we've created this wash of color, and you can see the drips and the different forms. I did use a hair dryer to help this dry a little faster, so that's a good tool if you don't have the patience to wait between layers. So now what we can do is we can come in, and here I've made a palette of different colors, and we can just come in into these little spaces, and you can follow inside of the lines or not, it's up to you. And we can paint in between these little spaces. And you can kind of feel in your body where this lovely little orange, where else does this orange want to be? So you might want to come over here and add one over here. And it's up to you. Maybe you want to be systematic about it. Maybe you want to create a mathematical equation or an algorithm for where you place the color, and that's what decides where the color goes. I sometimes do that for fun. And then sometimes I just go with what my body decides, what I'm feeling like visually or viscerally, where the next color wants to be. So we're just going to fill in these squares. And it's just a lovely little coloring project, but also you're really creating overall a grid of color that's gonna compose your intention with the piece, or just having a fun time painting. Doesn't need to be so serious. And it's okay if the lines are blending. This paint is still wet, so I like that. I like that if you come in close, you can see maybe this blue is still a little bit wet, so I'm gonna kind of touch it with the red brush, and I'm gonna pull that blue into that space. And then I still have a little orange on there, so here's a gradation. You can kind of see a little gradient there. And I like that this blue is still wet and it's falling into this square. It makes it interesting. It's really how nature works. It's not a perfect form, or not a symmetrical form. You could argue that it's perfect, I'm sure. So we're just gonna go and add, let's see, where else does red want to be? And then when you have a little bit of leftover color from each color, you can add it into these other places of your canvas. Maybe you want a little bit of orange red right here. Maybe you want a little up here. And you can have this, and a lot of times with art, our eye really wants to see a repetition of color or a repetition of pattern, right? That's our natural gravitation, so we might want to add a little of those. And then you'll come back in and you can maybe cover them over again later, but leave a little exposed, and that's satisfying. And then in between, we just wash off our brush in our water, and I'm gonna add some green, but not that color green. I'm gonna add a different color green. There we go. You can see I'm just not so serious about it, but I am interested in a certain color. I'm gonna add a little yellow, because that's the color I'm going for. A little bit of blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow. And I'm gonna bring that in here. I'm just filling in the color. They kind of look like little gems, little gemstones. And again, you might want to take some of this and just hint a little in other places on the canvas. So we have that repetition and that pattern. Ooh, look, there's a great big section. I'm gonna go for it. I'm just gonna paint that whole section. Because it's nice sometimes with abstract work, since you're deriving from a blank canvas, to have this structure that just gives you a little bit of form to work in. And then you can still see this sort of happen chance happening when the paint is mixing beyond your own really design. And the blending of the two is really how we walk in life. You know, there's what life gives you, and then there's what you do with it. And it's okay if you go over the lines, because you're going to fill the rest in with color as well. Or leave it blank. Now I'm going to want some of that lighter green up here, just for my eye to feel balanced. And again, you might want to add some of this up here. Or here. Or here. And then sometimes I like to find a little pocket to put a surprise, so I might have put a different color here, but I'm loving this light yellow green so much that I'm going to use that, since that's an isolated little spot of our grid. But it's still a repetition, because you can see that blue line through there that's going to repeat all through here and even down here. Then you can just keep going, adding your color, making it whatever you want it to be. Thanks for joining me today.